Okay, I did update my site to add an in-depth component for AMZY. I also figured it's a good time to just do an overview of AMZY, how the fund's been doing with time, and what the fund is. So I guess for those new, AMZY is the YieldMax ETF related to Amazon. It was released a bit ago. We can see over time, of course, the YieldMax funds basically use an options strategy in order to generate income, which is then paid out on a monthly basis. For those who own it, every month you get a payment. Overall, how the fund has done, there's three scenarios. Compared to the underlying stock, which would just be Amazon, you can see if you would have owned the YieldMax fund relative to just owning Amazon, here are the scenario metrics you're looking at. This assumes you start off with 100 shares of the YieldMax fund back when it was initiated at $20 a share. So you can see if you would have owned AMZY and not reinvest your dividends, your 2,000 would be about 3,211. Whereas if you would have reinvested your dividends, you'd have about, I can't tell, reinvest your dividends looks like 3,593, and just owning the Amazon stock be at 3,582. So reinvest your dividends as well as owning the underlying stock have performed somewhat the same, whereas not reinvest your dividends fallen a little bit behind, but if it's income you need to live on, or income you intend to use for other purposes, also pretty good performance. From a distribution perspective, assuming you would have bought the $20 AMZY back on its initiation date back in late 2023, here's how the distributions have been since inception date, the largest being $1.17 per share back in late 2024. But recently it's been pretty good, right around the 59-cent mark, or 59 to 65, with 79 cents actually back in May. In order to see this from a different perspective, this kind of shows total return broken out down into its components. So of course, if you own one of these ETFs, your total return is the ETF price as it moves throughout time. Currently, the ETF price is sitting somewhere around $16.50, but your cumulative dividends, or the dividends you received added up, have come to $15.61. So here's a total return illustration. If you would have held AMZY, this assumes no reinvested dividends, just keep the cumulative dividend in a checking account as such. The main reason, though, I guess I wanted to dive in is I did add the in-depth component. So what this does is it goes out to the YieldMax site and it pulls in the current holdings of AMZY, which is really just a whole bunch of options. Currently, they have a synthetic position. For those who don't know what a synthetic is, probably be best to read or ask Grok or some other chat GPT tool for an explanation. But basically, they buy a long-dated call, or not a long-dated, but they buy a call at a strike and sell a put at the same strike to mimic what the stock would do. So you can basically think of a synthetic as just as owning the stock, just using less capital to do such. Then they use that as collateral to sell options against to generate a weekly or whatever time expiration date they sell to generate income from that, and then use that income as well as maybe income they make from owning the synthetic to pay out investors on a monthly basis. Currently, with the stock price of Amazon sitting at about $222, so right around where this black line is, we got some calls that are sold at $220 and $222.50. The $222.50 actually expired today. So not ideal to have calls sold that are less than where the stock price currently is. Those will have to be closed out by either buying them back or rolling them forward to a future expiration date at a higher strike price. But that will be done at what you would assume to be a loss. But for the week ahead, it looks like we did have the calls that were sold at $220, which we can leave those standing until next week to see if maybe the stock price would default a little bit, and maybe those could still have a possibility of expiring worthless. But we do, if Amazon, the underlying stock, continues to go higher, looks like we are capturing gains again on the synthetic position at $227.50. But then we got more contracts sold at the $230, and then more call contracts bought at the $237.50. You can see the number of shares or contracts here is 3,360, and we also got 300 and 360. So if you put a circular around these two, this kind of acts as your credit spread. So they're basically selling a call at $230 and buying a call at $237.50. This generates income, but at the same time, if the stock price runs above $237.50, the synthetic would start capturing income or capturing value again rather than being capped on the upside. Let's see, as far as their fund makeup per share, currently the way they're sitting, they got their other contracts that are sold. Those other contracts are the ones that are the options that are sold and bought netted together, excluding the synthetic. The synthetic I break out specifically here. You see it got a value of about 30 cents per share at the moment. As far as how they're using their synthetic, so when they build the synthetic, currently the synthetic has 13,335 contracts, giving it basically the right or the movement of take that times 100 and that many shares. So it basically gives them collateral for a lot of shares. And then they use that to sell contracts against. They don't have any remaining capacity. What that means is that they've used their full collateral to sell contracts against. So they're using that up. That said, they do have credit spreads on 10,335 contracts for 78% of what they've sold. As far as the fund position overall, we're sitting at, looks like just under 300 million for the ETF in total. It's been growing steadily with time. Not one of the most, it is in Group D with Misty, so clearly it's not one of the most focused on funds because Misty tends to suck the air out of the room as far as that's concerned, especially when Group D reports of the single stock ETFs. I think that's what I want to cover further positioning. As far as how the fund's been performing over time from a component perspective, if you go to fund holdings over time, and I got this data from late July, so not a ton, but I'll keep collecting it. Not a lot to see here, really. The cash positioning looks like it's probably just moved with paying. When it paid the distribution, it probably went down. And then it's been holding steady since then. Generally, the cash position will go up or down based on when it sells the weekly contracts or maybe if it goes out more than a week, 2 weeks. The money they take in initially from selling those should increase the cash position. Other reasons you see the cash position go up would be if they take their synthetic and cash it out. If the synthetic gains a lot of value, was recently the case with HOOY or Robinhood's Hui. They'd cash it out, which would shoot the cash per share up. The ETF price, of course, which you can see here in blue, is basically if you take the blue line plus the yellow line plus the red line, add them all together, that's basically your ETF price per share. Currently, you see we're sitting at an ETF price just about where your cash price is, which means your synthetic and other contracts that you have sold are netting each other out at the moment. So not really a lot to see there, but something to look at if there is a big move, either in the synthetic or some other metric. But yeah, overall, I guess there's a quick and short overview of AMZY for those investors looking to get into it. It's currently $15.31 at the moment. Fun to track over time, I think. It's been doing decent, and actually, which is interesting, is it's one of the few funds where if you would have invested in YieldMax and actually reinvest your dividends, it's actually depending on the exact details of when you take the dividend or distribution and at what price you'd buy at. I guess based on my assumptions for those kind of minute details, the reinvested dividends for YieldMax is actually doing slightly better than the underlying equity, which is unique to these funds, but something that definitely can happen. Yeah, overall, I guess thanks for tuning in. That's AMZY overview.